All right. Hi, guys. Welcome to the Lunge and Lift podcast. Today, Rob and I will be talking about everything skill acquisition. How do you learn a new skill? What are your considerations? Where do people go wrong? And what are the most important things to spend your time on? So, Rob, let's kick it off, mate. What sort of skills, what sort of skills are you learning at the moment?
I'm trying to cycle better. I'm balls deep into cycling at the moment. I've got this bug where I've found that with strength training and like the CrossFit side of stuff, where I had kind of learned most of the skills and I can do them, and say with the strength stuff, I was always in a gym where I wouldn't necessarily always be the strongest, but I'll be one of the strongest. So the competition wasn't necessarily always there, even though I could put myself into, say, CrossFit comps where I'd be like nothing. But it obviously then wasn't then something that was then driving me to do. Whereas at the moment where I've just really gone into cycling a lot, and the people that I'm cycling with are better than me.
Yeah.
So that's now my skill. I'm just absolutely trying to hone that and just become proficient. And it's crazy how beyond the actual physical skill, which is what a lot of stuff we're going to talk about today, the biggest change in my cycling at the moment that has been able to help me keep up with some of the people I've been out with is the mental approach to it. And being able, because the one difference that I found with cycling is where in a workout, like a CrossFit workout, okay, cool, I've got a 9-minute time cap, or I've got an AMRAP for 9 minutes, so I'm going to work as long as it's done. But when you're cycling and you've got a big fuck off hill that you've got to attack, and then you've got to carry on after that, and learning how to recover when you're gassed and then go again. Do you know, that for me was a completely new, because when I'd cycled before, it was mainly just like for distance or commuting or whatever. So now being doing it a bit more in a competitive state, it's just a whole different kettle of fish. And now having a different mindset, I've just noticed my performance improve, even though I probably haven't actually improved that much.
Yeah.
It's just in that side. So it just shows that the skill acquisition isn't always a physical thing.
Yeah.
And I think that leads on really nice into today. So because obviously we've got so many different aspects of, like within, say, the training sphere, how skill acquisition, it can be misunderstood at times because everyone kind of gears towards that perfect skill, that they think that this is what we need. So where do you want to start, Ash?
Well, I think that's a great start. Like, first of all, I think a lot of people wouldn't consider cycling a skill. It is like, there's technique, there's being in the right position, there's coordinating your body correctly, there's being still through the upper body, not wasting any power with wayward legs, just swinging to the sides and leaking energy. And something you said really nicely then was learning to recover when you're gassed and carry on. And it is a skill. Like, people think of skills as only super high levels of hand-eye coordination, but actually there's a physiological skill there of your body learning to continue to output work when in a fatigued state, and that needs to be practiced. You can be bad at that, and you can forget how to do that if you're out of a rhythm. And I think a lot of our listeners will have felt this at some stage when they're in a rhythm of running, cycling, even using the rower in the gym, and then they take some time off, but they're still doing fitness in other areas. They come back to that simple, in air quotes, low skill movement, but they feel a lot less fit, and it feels a lot more difficult because that movement pattern is not fresh for them. And I think that's the definition of a skilled movement that most people would get on board with is a coordinated movement of the body to achieve a task, like whether it's hand-eye or just coordinating your limbs yourself. And I think one distinction or one nuance to that I'd like to illustrate today is the difference between inter and intramuscular coordination. So this is something we talk about a lot at Red Pill, doing biomechanical assessment. So the intramuscular coordination is how well you can coordinate the motor units within a muscle. So if you listen to our strength podcast last week, we talk about how well you can recruit a given muscle. So is that muscle available to function at a high level to you? And then the intermuscular coordination is how well do you coordinate all the different muscles in your body or around a given limb to achieve the movement that you're looking for.
So on that, so a skill I know that you're trying to learn at the moment is your golf swing.
Yeah.
So would that be more an intermuscular because you're trying to coordinate everything to generate something? But it's a bit of both, isn't it, as well? Because obviously you're trying to understand how to utilize your intramuscular contractions and skills, and then you've got the outside one.
Exactly. So I think this leads quite nicely to something we talked about on the Red Pill call this morning, actually, which is trading off or understanding the differences between biomechanical issues and technique issues. So it could be in my golf swing that I'm unable to activate or use a certain muscle to its optimal potential, in which case we'd need to do some sort of biomechanical assessment, understand how it is dysfunctional and address that. Or it could just be a technique issue that I don't understand what I need to do with my body, and I have the ability to do it. There's no biomechanical reason why I can't, but I just don't know, or I haven't done enough practice to actually execute on an intermuscular basis. So coordinating my whole body as one integrated unit. And it basically comes down to coaching experience and knowledge and understanding to identify which of those is limiting the skill. Because at the end of the day, is the golf swing good? Is the club head going where you want it to? Is it arriving at the ball and sending the ball where you want it to go? That's the outcome that everyone cares about. But understanding what's causing mishits and you to not get that desired outcome is a huge part of coaching, and being an athlete is understanding where you go wrong. And I think the classic style of coaching is cues, technique pointers, and seeing where a movement goes wrong from a understanding point of view. Like, well, we were talking about it just before the call. Hip extension and weightlifting is a perfect example of this. Some people just don't understand that they need to extend the hip to get maximum power when they're pulling the bar. Other people physically can't extend the hip because they're so tight that their hip extension is lacking. So they both look the same when they're doing a clean or a snatch, but the reasons behind why they do it could be very different and need different interventions to get them pulling correctly.
Yeah, because us, I guess, the known as muted hip, basically, where you're it's when you're strong, you get away with it a lot because a lot of the time you have so much more potential if you do use it. Like, I'm an example with that. So I've seen a lot of my older lifts, especially with the snatch, that I'm so keen to get down underneath it. I'll rip it off the floor and I'll get it to the thighs. It'll brush the thighs and I'll pull, but I won't get then that hip extension, as you say, that I won't get the squeeze of my bum, so I won't get that glute contraction, so I won't get that extra bit of power that thrusts the weight up with the pull. So then if I finish that pull, I'll have a lot more of an easier time getting underneath it compared to if I use the muscle, which I'm doing at the moment, where I was doing at the moment, where I'd hit it and I'd go and I'd pull under the bar, which is great, and I'd be fast enough. But then what would happen is I'd be already at the bottom pretty much when the weight hits me. So I'm more likely going to collapse under that weight. And I see this a lot in coaching. And it's like when you're in a class environment or just people getting into snatching, it's that urgency to get under the bar. Whereas I know a lot of the time it's just be patient, which is one of the hardest things for a lot of people to do. And it seems counterintuitive. You're throwing the weight up overhead. So if you have to wait longer to make it easier, like, no, I need to get under it. So, and it's going to be the same as in any context, even if you don't weight lift or anything like that. I say to clients a lot of the time where it's just slow movement down. And if you're about to lose some balance with something, try and hold that position for a moment and pull yourself back to the correct position. Because if you're just always doing that 9.5 reps, so you're supposed to be doing 10 reps, and on that ninth rep, you do it, and then you go down for your 10th, you do it, and then you finish, and then you stand up quickly. It's like, you've just done 9.5. You technically haven't done the eccentric portion of one of the reps. And a lot of the time, that's when people then, it just, bad movement patterns and so forth. But it's just taking your time, because the more you understand the movement, the better you can execute it. And that's when it comes to skill acquisition, as you said there, it's the understanding. And a lot of this is an internal thing. As a coach, we can say to our clients and say to the members and stuff like that, how to perform it to a way that's, say, safe and optimal. But at the end of the day, you have to, as the athlete, you have to have an understanding of what the goal is and what the intent of it is, because without that, you're just trying to do what we say, which isn't it, it sounds the thing, because obviously we're trying to look out for your best interest, but you have to understand what it feels like, because if you're always going on based off words and you don't have the internal feeling, that's like that intro, as you say. If you don't have that connection with your own body, you're going to be limited with your skill and how far you can go, because you don't understand how you got from A to B. Or no, you don't understand how you got from A to C, because you only know from, say, A to B. So
yeah, spot on. And I think a nice illustration of that is to go back to me and my golf. I've got quite a good understanding of what a full swing is and the key criteria for executing a good swing. So even though I don't do it all the time, I know what I'm trying to do. So that's probably the strongest part of my game, is anytime I'm hitting a full swing. And I contrast that with my short game, where I have a much poorer understanding of the technique involved and what I'm trying to do. So when I'm stood over the ball, I'm thinking about a few cues for the type of shot I'm trying to hit, but because I'm not even sure of what I'm trying to do, the chances of me actually getting it right are very slim, because even if I do everything that I'm trying to do, it's not necessarily the right technique. And we see this in multiple different situations in the gym. People they don't understand the technique of a snatch, so they don't know what they're trying to do. So what chance have they got of actually getting it right unless they have a conceptual understanding of, okay, I want to keep the bar close, or I want to fully extend the hip, make sure I get nice and tall before I drop under it, keep my arm straight. Unless they know that these are things that they should do, it's very unlikely that they would do them instinctively.
So I guess as a coach, this is where so for any coaches listening, that when you are talking with an athlete, is making sure you're not just literally trying to throw every single cue at them under the sun, because with a snatch in particular, right, just using that, so that's getting something from the floor to overhead in one motion. Now if you're trying to do that, and I'm saying, right, keep the bar, so keep over the bar, keep the bar close, keep the bar, like, use your legs, then finish your pull how you go, all these things, and like what the fuck. So like, you used the example earlier where when we was offline talking about, obviously, with Jousey and that, when talking about, say, the power clean or something. Now just using the snatch as the example, since we're talking about the snatch, if you say something, right, get this ground head. And then as a coach, you're looking at it and saying, cool, what's the worst thing there that's standing out to you that needs addressing, that we could probably fix as an easy thing? Because as long as you shouldn't be using a weight that's going to really destroy you anyway if you don't know how to snatch. So most of the time you're stronger than what you're getting overhead anyway. So most of the time that thing is just learning the skill. So by not over stressing it and saying, no, it needs to be perfect, it's like, no, take a step back. Look, just let them move and see. At the end of the day, as long as you've given them an idea, they can give their own interpretation of that idea, and then you can coach each piece at a time rather than just going fucking all the cues. It's like, just chill.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice point, and something I wanted to cover today as well. And how I describe that is variations and variables. So when you're learning a new movement, you're never going to get it perfect first time, and the process of skill acquisition actually requires some variation for the nervous system to experience when the movement goes slightly wrong, so it can learn to correct that. And it's the same process whether it's a baby learning to stand up and walk and falling over, or somebody perfecting their bar path in a snatch. It's just the context which is slightly different. And what I mean by that is, when a baby stands up and they start to walk, they'll overbalance one way and probably, but in doing that, say you fall to the right, you're loading all the muscles on the left side of your body, which should pull you back onto line. But if you never fell right, those muscles would never get loaded, so they would never get the stimulus to become stronger, and they would never get the nervous experience of what it's like to respond, to get that stretch reflex. So the falling to the right is necessary to learn to correct the falling to the right. And if that baby never fell to the right, it wouldn't learn to correct a fall to the right as quickly.
Yeah.
And the same goes for technique in the snatch, in that you can't feel what the right bar path is like until you've contrasted it with the wrong bar path. So somebody might be pulling it out in front and it feels really heavy, and then they can contrast that to the perfect bar path and the feeling of weightlessness they get in the turnover. They then have that memory to compare and contrast, so they know what they're trying to do. And it goes back to what we were just saying, is they're like, okay, I'm looking for that sensation now. That's when I do it right. And you can accelerate the process by skewing the variables to focus on your weak point. So it could be doing snatch pulls in a complex before going into a power snatch, before going into full snatch. You can do this in squatting by changing the stance, so going wide stance by 1 foot forward, toes in, toes out, whatever is necessary to give the athlete the experience of doing it correctly or in a better way, and then the body will learn faster. The caveat to that is the more skilled you are at a movement, the less variation around optimal you can give somebody to actually improve the technique. So somebody who's never squatted before, you can have their feet all over the place and get them squatting, and their core squat's probably going to get better. If you've got a power lifter who's looking to squat 300 or 400 kilos, then you're probably not going to have them like super wide stance, one toe in, one toe out, or something crazy, because it's too far away from the thing that they're trying to improve. But as a concept, I want people to come away with the understanding that adding in some variation is actually essential to the skill acquisition process. You can't stop someone from snatching until they can snatch perfectly, because it will never happen. And that applies to everything.
You say that, and this just reminds me straight away back to our other podcast where we talk about like the conjugate system, and like about being too far away from the task that's needed to be improved. So using the squat as an example, so doing a bench, doing a box squat, doing a squat with chains, so these are all going to be different skill acquisitions essentially, but they're all honing the squat. It's like, so currently one of my clients, I got him. He's normally a high bar squatter, and so again, just to change things up, we've been squatting for a while. So we're doing some low bar squats and we're doing some front squats in the programming, and it's just, and he used to do low bar squat probably about a year or two ago, and so he just goes like, oh, this feels really weird. So of course it is. It's a completely different movement now. It's more of a hinge rather than necessarily a squat, and so there's more to it, and it's just like it's going to take a couple of weeks to get into that, but building up the strength and then the low bar squat, yes, okay, the carryover to a high bar squat is slightly different because it's different loading, but it's that squat mechanics overall. He's getting his health from a top position to a bottom position and get himself back up again. So it's you're learning, and again, you're going to use different positions. Our high bar squatter, so having a bar on your traps, and you hit a bottom position, and you sometimes see where people's hips shoot backwards first in a way, which is then going to get them into an essentially like a low bar squat, but with the bar in a bad position, because it's going to be folding you forward. So then you're going to basically do a good morning, which is what some people call a low bar squat anyway. So again, you got to see that where a bad position isn't always a bad position, because it's have you had the chance to be there. I know when we talk about like with the deadlift, so if we want to using the deadlift as an example, everyone kind of has this conception, including myself at time, of how like a rounded back with a deadlift isn't ideal. Now it's probably not ideal, but there's an opportunity to train that position. And like when you see some of the people lifting their max amount of weights and their body goes into a rounded back, if you've lifted the heaviest deadlift you've ever lifted and you've never been into a rounded back position, do you really want it to be with the heaviest load you've ever had? I'd probably say no. I'd say it'd be quite good. That's why it's so important when you're a newbie, and it's understanding that it's okay to be shit, to be a little bit shit and then get better, because it means you're actually conditioning yourself for bad positions that you will inevitably hit. Because at the end of the day, if you're shit now with a lightweight, you're going to be shit when you get heavy with a heavyweight. So your body's going to hit that position. So it's good to have been exposed to it at some point, because without the exposure, you're never going to learn. And I think this ties in exactly to where you just was. You having exposure to all positions, even when you are working your way up, is important. But the the severity of that position, I think, becomes a big thing when you need to think about how much load you're now loading yourself up with.
Yeah, I think to sum that up, it's basically doing things a bit wrong will help you to do things right. And we're joking about
that's a short-winded version.
Yeah, and there is air quotes again around the wrong. It just reminds me of that video we were talking about before, the video meme about Mr. Functional, and he basically just does everything with perfect technique. He won't put his hands overhead without setting his shoulders back and down. He'll hinge at the hips before getting in and out of a chair, and braces his core before he picks up a pen off the floor. And I think it's funny because it shines a light on how restrained we are in giving the body natural variation. Like, we move in 3 planes of motion. We don't always sit in perfect posture. We don't pick up a pen off the floor like we're picking up a 200 kilo deadlift. All these things are a bit hypocritical. So actually we should be training our body to withstand all this variation, because that's how life works, and it's especially how sport works. That you're not able to consciously set yourself up in a high speed dynamic sport like field sport. Obviously for like powerlifting or Olympic weightlifting, you are given that chance to be very conscious about how you do that one rep. But when you look at other sports, having things much more subconscious and reactive is better for performance. What other skills should we take on, Nate?
Well, I think a really nice one is to kind of bring it in for our CrossFit listeners. We've got the handstand, and we've also got butterfly pull-ups. So I'd like to kind of touch on the handstand position, because talking about skill acquisition here, obviously it's quite a skill in itself to go upside down, whether that's supported, unsupported, or on a box or whatever. To just be upside down is the first skill, because I think proprioception wise, day to day, you're not really upside down really ever. So that is something which a lot of people, when we said at the start about like with me cycling, how like the mental, like the adaptations there that have to come about. Something like a handstand, people think, well, I should be able to do that. It's just I'm upside down. But that's a skill to be able to take yourself upside down, and then be able to understand how to support yourself, because even that in its skill. So what would you say would be maybe some examples of like the intra and intermuscular components to, say, the handstand?
Yeah, great question. So I think handstand intermuscularly, it's obviously full body, being able to coordinate all the muscles from your fingertips to your tiptoes to contract at the appropriate times to keep you balanced. So it's the same process of proprioception as whether you're standing on your hands or you're standing on your feet. You basically feel the floor, feel where your body weight is relative to your feet or your hands, and then correct before you overbalance one way or another. The only difference is we're very good at it on our feet. So if we start to fall over to one side, like we said about the baby earlier, the muscles on the other side of the body will contract to bring you back into balance. It takes a lot more time and effort to learn to do the same thing with your hands and have those reactive contractions to bring you back into alignment and not fall over. An intramuscular example relating to the handstand could be your ability to use the core, so your abs. This is probably more relevant for handstand walking when you're trying to shift a bit of weight forward, so you get a lot more stretch through the core. Because everything's different, when you're upside down, gravity works in the opposite direction. It takes a while for your nervous system to understand that the driver of the movement is opposite. So the stretch comes from the other end of the muscle, and it needs to be able to perceive that stretch from, we could call it bottom up, from your toes coming towards the abs rather than from your head going towards the abs. So you need to be able to feel that stretch in the abs and then contract your amount to stop you overbalancing, but not so much that it pulls you out of the handstand walk and pulls you backwards. So that's an example of coordination within the abs, learning to dial in the right amount of contraction to control handstand walk without pulling you out of it or falling forwards without control.
So just before I want to go into something a bit more serious about that, isn't it funny how we say fingertips and tiptoes? So it's the opposite. So your tips are not your toe tips, but your fingertips. Yeah, as you said that, I was like, oh yeah, why is that called tiptoes? But yeah, on a serious point. So coming with that handstand and understanding about the core stability and stuff. Now, this is then, I guess, where using the deadlift example of the rounded back, having the example of being anyone that's seen someone do a handstand walk, especially for the first time, and also when people are tired or just some people in general, and they're in a massive like scorpion looking body. So basically they look like a C. Compare that to say like a proper gymnast who has had so much time at skill acquisition of upside down, they can do pretty much a handstand walk in a complete straight line upwards and walk very proficiently. Now, as someone learning the skill of a handstand walk, it's much, I personally, and I know you're the same mindset here, but it's that thing of it's much better to have that scorpion body and get yourself used to being upside down walking, and then fine tuning that at a later, like as you're getting better and better and better, because you'll find doing that scorpion stance, say as an example on your hand, you'll know your lower back blows out, everything hurts. It's not a good position for you, so you can't do it for that long. But that's a lie. You can do it for a long time if you're conditioned in that position. But if you can then obviously start to fine tune it and say and as you get better, you'll be in a more of an upright position. And then as you start to tire or you need some more momentum, you allow that body to fall into that scorpion style looking body to keep you propelled forward.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the considerations for the scorpion, the reason why people go into it is because the more arched you are, the more stretch you put on that anterior chain. So you're stretching the abs and loading them up. So you get that tension, which provides the stability to keep you in control. As you become more skilled in the handstand walk, you need less of that stretch to coordinate the motion. And the reason why you might want to be more upright and less scorpioned is the lever length is shorter. So with the feet miles in front of your hands, your body feels like it weighs more than if you're perfectly stacked. And this is the same physics as if you hold a dumbbell at your shoulder, it can feel very light. But if you hold it at arm's length out in front, that same dumbbell feels a lot heavier. So if you're in a massive scorpion, your body's doing a lot more work to be in a handstand in that shape, compared to if you're nicely aligned and just balanced and you've got the skeleton doing a lot more of the load bearing as opposed to the muscular system. So it's more efficient from that point of view.
Beautiful. And so then kind of going along the lines of into like pull-ups, and so especially like with butterfly pull-ups. So anyone who doesn't know what a butterfly pull-up is, it's pretty much the most efficient way to do pull-ups in CrossFit, and also the thing that will get absolutely hammered about why CrossFit is bad. So it's a lot of the time it's the understanding of how to butterfly and why it's being done and so forth. Now, just discussing that. So being stacked in a handstand, it obviously makes it easier. As you said, that proprioception, your body has to do essentially less work to get the same output and so forth. Now, when you're doing butterfly pull-ups, obviously the same principle there of having a tighter body, having a tight hollow, a tight arch, being able to create that cyclical motion. Now, when you're starting to learn the pull-up, you're going to be a lot more scorpion-esque. So the legs will probably be a lot more flayed apart because you need more momentum from, say, the lower body to generate that cyclical motion, rather than actually being able to generate that same power through a tight body. So what are some of the points that we might want to think about when it comes to the butterfly pull-up?
I think the key thing for butterfly pull-ups and kipping in general is related to what we were talking about earlier, about getting an understanding of how the movement works. Like, there is a good reason for why CrossFitters choose to kip when they're banging out high repetitions of the pull-up, and that's because it makes it easier. And the reason it makes it easier is it's full body. You get to use more than just your upper body. So bodybuilders will do pull-ups because they're trying to work on their back, their lats, and their biceps. So any work that gets done by another part of the body is taking away from that effect. In CrossFit, because it's just about accumulating reps as efficiently as possible, we actually want to get more of the body involved and to use speed and momentum so that the actual work done on a local muscular level is less. So how does kipping achieve that? Momentum. So by swinging the hips forwards and back, if we time it right, we can transfer that horizontal momentum into lift, which is that weightless feeling you get, and you can take your hands off the bar because your body's just rising and you haven't even pulled with your upper body yet. So you're getting closer to the bar before you've done anything with your arms or much with your lats. And that's why kipping is an advantage. So if that's what we're trying to achieve, having an understanding of getting your hips moving backwards and forwards and then upwards, that's the goal of the kip. So when you're teaching somebody to butterfly, obviously the standard progressions are learning to switch from a hollow to an arch rhythmically so that they're not swinging around the bar, they're just changing shape from one to the other. Once they've got the hang of that and they can start to feel the moment when the hips lift, then they can start to time it together with a bit of a pull to get their chin over the bar and landing in that arch position to go again through the cyclical process. But if they don't understand the shapes that they need to be, and they don't have the ability to be in those shapes, and they don't understand the sequence which they go through those shapes, it's going to be very difficult for them to actually get the hang of it. Some people have really good mirroring ability, so they can see somebody else do it and there's like, okay, I'm just going to do what they're doing. But other people, you need to break it down and work on a specific element of that movement. Maybe it's biomechanical, the reason why they can't get into it. Maybe it's just understanding. And that's why there are all the weird and wonderful progressions that exist in trainings, because for someone, that was a thing that made it click for them and gave them the ability to unlock that new movement.
Yeah, because that's the thing. Some people learn through seeing, some people learn through doing, some people learn, and like when you're breaking it down, you have to feel it. But some people just have to do it wrong, as you say, to learn how to do it right. Because so when you're going with the butterfly pull-up as an example, there are many say drills to become more proficient. But when you then take away whatever that option is, so say for instance when you're using your foot on the box, so there's a foot in the box drill where you're pushing yourself up into a cyclical motion, and as soon as you take away that box, you then need to think about how am I now going to generate that power. So if you haven't understood the movement, the box drill is essentially completely pointless, because you're just doing a leg raise multiple times and your shoulders, your upper body's going through it, but your upper body, as soon as you move the box, that upper body will not go into that position because you don't know how to get to that position. So the understanding is so important. Not saying that the box drill is a pointless drill, but the thing is understanding when to use it and the right person to use it with. And if you're doing it yourself, is in understanding why you're doing it, because it's where we talk about it like with accessory lifts in previous podcasts and stuff like that. Make sure the intent and purpose is there for a specific movement. Otherwise, you're just doing what everyone else is doing, and you might be really good at the timing. You just don't understand how to use your hips. So then that's probably not the best drill for you, because you understand how to fall through the bar, and so you already know that bit. So it's understanding where that bit comes from. And I think that's what I really want, what we both want to get from this podcast, is to, as you kind of said earlier, Ash, where it's that thing of it's sometimes good, it's good to do it wrong to get it right. And it's to when you're looking at your own lifts, and when hopefully you're filming your own lifts, and understanding where you break down and when you are doing things right, and the importance of breaking down and being able to take feedback on yourself and look at a cycle broken down. How do I fix that? And how do I then maybe train that broken down position safely, so then when I do go there again, I can then perform still? Because that's, at the end of the day, when it comes to most sports, it's about performing, right? Which is why we're in the performance section of our podcast series. And that's the thing, is we want to be able to perform. So it's understanding what we need to do to make sure that we can keep at the best performance that we can do.
Yeah. And I think, well, probably the last point we've got time for is talking about skills under fatigue and the relevance of intensity. So again, this is another topic we're really hot on at Red Pill, when we contrast skill versus threshold. And you can have a skill at a given threshold. So CrossFit's probably the best sport to illustrate this point, in that somebody can have 100 kilo 1 rep max snatch, but in the sport of CrossFit, it's relatively rare that you'll get a chance to test your snatch completely fresh. It might be at the end of a really gassy metcon piece when you're tired, and then you've got to do your snatch, or it might be at the end of a 3-day competition when you've got accumulated fatigue from 3 days of events. So a more relevant question than what's your 1 rep max snatch is, what snatch can you actually pull out the bag in almost any situation? And when you're considering training for sporting performance, having the relevant skill in the relevant situation is what really matters, rather than having the relevant skill. So this can be from fatigue, it can be from a psychological point of view just as easily. So if we go to football, something everyone's familiar with, you can have scoring a free kick from 25 yards. It's one thing to do that on the training ground, fresh, once you've already done 50 free kicks, to practice, feel your technique, and they've all been in exactly the same spot. It's another thing to do that in the 5th minute of a friendly match. It's another thing to do that in a Premier League match, and it's another thing to do that in extra time in the World Cup final. They all have different challenges to prevent you from executing that skill effectively. And in your training, having an understanding of which ones of those are going to hold you back. Is it the psychology? Like, is it that you just bottle it whenever there's a crowd or whenever it matters, you get the yips and fuck it up? Or is it that you just haven't done enough practice, and even fresh after 50 reps, you still can't score that free kick or get it on target? Depending who you are as an athlete, your training needs to vary quite a lot. And what makes the great sportsman is that they can actually access those skills under pressure with fatigue when it really counts. And I think that's a common feature amongst all the greats of, like, if you look at Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Messi or Ronaldo in football, they can actually deliver the goods in the situations that really count when they're tired under pressure. And I think if we're looking at skill acquisition, we can relate that to our own mortal training is what is it that prevents us from executing the skills in our lowly levels of performance. So I think one for me is playing 7-a-side football again now, and I've not played a huge amount of football in my life compared to most people in England, and having a kickabout in the park on the weekend, my touch is still shit, but moderately shit. Whereas in a game, when I'm tired, under pressure, and there is a opposition who really wants to get the ball off me urgently, it gets even worse. And I think that illustrates the point nicely, is that the pressure and the fatigue mean that skill has degraded. So for me, I need to practice my first touch when I'm tired to start with, so I can actually control the ball a little bit, and then start to look at integrating that into a pressurized situation. But first of all, training my touch when I'm a little bit tired. I'm
just picturing you right now. You get past the ball in the game and you run away from it. Like, I can't touch it. I can't touch it. I'm going to be shit.
I touch it, but then the ball runs away from me. That's what
it's funny, because I think whenever you put me in like a 5-a-side or any, because 11-a-side, just no chance. But with something like 5-a-side, where my, say, skill isn't quite at the highest, I then just use brute size and force. But then I'm like that headless chicken, so I'm normally either in goal or defense sort of area, because my accuracy isn't quite of a striker's positioning. But I'm the one that I literally just chase the ball. So I'm not in a position. I'm literally running after the ball everywhere, headless chicken. By the end of the game, I've done loads of running and stuff. It's great, but I'm just gassed. And a lot of the time I'm just running into people, which isn't always a good thing, especially with a 5-a-side, because it's easy ankle rolling and stuff like that.
Yeah, so that's the team wit style of play as well. Just, fitness first.
Fitness first. That's good. That's really good. So I think that wraps us up nicely, guys, today. So really hope you have enjoyed today's podcast and you managed to take away some gems. Just remember, it's okay to be shit. Just try to be better. That's kind of the summary of today. So thanks a lot for listening. Really do appreciate your time, and we appreciate there's a lot of other stuff that you could be listening to right now. So I appreciate that you're giving us your ears. Apart from that, Find us on all the usual platforms. Lunge.lift on Instagram. Find us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Lunge Lift Podcast. And until next week.
Thanks, guys.